Hello, everyone, and welcome along to the Wellness Platform podcast. I'm your host, Libby Rainger. In these episodes, I hope to inspire you to find balance, happiness, and health so that you can flourish in all areas of your life. Hello, guys. Welcome back to another episode of the Wellness Platform podcast. Today, on today's episode, I'm talking with an amazing woman. Her name is Faye Lawand. She is an internal conflict resolution expert, and she also specializes in stress elimination and relaxation. She is an international speaker, a trainer, and she's also created her very own formula for rapid transformation. And she also has a lived experience of having a chronic condition and then overcoming that through the beauty of the subconscious mind and the nervous system. And if you've listened to the podcast for a while or you have done any work with me, you'll know that that's pretty much my biggest passion is the mind-body connection. So I was just in fascination with my conversation with her because she knows so much. She's such a wealth of knowledge. So I really hope you guys take something away from today's episode. And as always, I would really love it if you share this episode with a friend or a family member who might find it useful. Or share it to your Instagram story. Those little things really do help me so much to continue making the podcast. I guess just another side note, I hope you guys are all having a good lockdown, whether you're in New Zealand or Australia. I was informed the other day I had a few listeners in Canada, which was exciting. But yeah, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, I hope you're having a great day and I hope you enjoy the podcast. Hello, Faye, and welcome along to the podcast today. I'm so excited to have you here to dive into lots of interesting topics. How are you going? How's your lockdown going?
Likewise, Libby. I'm very happy to connect with you. And lockdown, I guess, is a good time to catch up on things like this and other pending tasks. And maybe use it as a gift. I look at it as a gift of time that we've been given.
Yeah, it's a great time to do podcasts. You're right. It's like the perfect
time
to
listen to podcasts, right? And to listen to podcasts and to share the podcast, pass them along.
Yeah, I feel like it's what I do with my spare time is like read books that I don't usually have time to read or listen to these. Like my podcast list's been getting so out of control and it's like there's so much time for all of the knowledge. What's your daily schedule looking like in lockdown?
So I'm still sticking to my morning routines, which for me are totally non-negotiable. And just last week, I started with a new morning routine. I decided to join the 5 a.m. club. You know that book, Robin Sharma, 5 a.m. club?
Mm-hmm.
Because for the longest time, I have had a cycle where I go to bed around 11:30, sometimes at midnight. And I'm an excellent sleeper, which is fantastic. I have good sound sleep, and then I'm up at about 7:30. And that's a big chunk of the morning gone, right? A very big chunk of the morning. And I still, I want to prioritize my meditation and my exercise and my fitness, but it means I'm not starting with the productivity part of my day until much later, until about 10:30. And then that becomes a little bit cyclical where I finish later, have dinner later, and go to bed later. And then, it was just some awareness, just bringing awareness to those habits. And the way the universe works is, just a few weeks ago, boom, I saw something about the 5 a.m. club and Robin Sharma. I was so drawn to it. So I started listening to him, and it just made so much sense what he was saying, that those early mornings during the day, I know they're very creative times during the day, but if you're up during those times and you're practicing intention about your day and your life, during the times when everyone else is asleep or most people are asleep, it just empowers you with even more self-mastery to go forward with your goals and with your intentions. That made so much sense for me. And now when I wake up early, for me, I love the silence. I adore the silence and the sounds of nature, but I love that feeling of, I'm practicing intention and I'm practicing being conscious and aware and awake when most of the world is asleep. It's a wonderful feeling.
Yeah, I hear people love it for the exact same reason. Like they love that feeling of not necessarily, I even had someone on the podcast a few weeks ago and he was like, it's not about being better than everyone, but there is something special about knowing that everyone else is asleep and you're like you're already at it. You're already up and at it. Was it a little bit hard at the start to wake up at 5 a.m. the first few days?
Oh my God. So I did a graded start, right? Yeah. So the first few days I did 6, and then I did 5:45, and then I did 5:30, and then I did 5:15, just to grade it a little bit. Mm-hmm. And the other thing that has been so helpful is I got a journal, and I'm going to share with you the name of the journal. It was also on my Instagram. It's by Sidekick. It's an evidence-based journal that it helps you. It has like, just like accountability practices to keep you accountable to yourself. That has made a big difference. It has made a big, big, big difference to have that type of structure and the accountability. I mean, we know accountability systems are so beneficial for making change.
I love it.
Yes. And also what has helped is not keeping the alarm in another room so that I have to get up. And then, I made a promise to myself that when I'm up, I'm not going to go back to bed again, right? So the phone is very far away from me. I have to get up to turn it off. And that's good. It's been great, actually. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. And on days where I'm really tired, like today, I am a little bit tired. I might do a 10-minute power nap or a 10-minute yoga nidra. Yeah, in the middle of the day.
Yoga nidras. I'm really into yoga nidras this lockdown as well. So good. That's a really great tip. I'm actually going to take that one on board, sleeping with the phone in a different room, because then because I know people will say, oh, I'll just snooze it at 5 a.m. and then the day's already started. But if you have to throw yourself out of bed to that annoying noise, you've got no choice. You're up. You're already up.
And yes. And the other reason why that's so useful is, I'm a freak about digital mindfulness. Like, I'm a freak about it. I'm obsessed with digital mindfulness. It keeps you from, if you have the tendency to scroll in bed either before you sleep or after you wake up, it actually keeps you from doing that because it's not there. And you can use that time when you're in your bed and your brain waves are so slow and your subconscious mind is so receptive to what you put in there towards beneficial goals instead of just scrolling.
Yeah. I've already got so many questions, so many avenues, but we need to come back to this stuff. I need to introduce you to the listeners first. So could you please tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do, what work you offer the world?
Yes. So I'm based in beautiful Auckland, New Zealand. My name is Faye Lawand, and I think you have introduced me. And I work with burnt out professionals or professionals who are nearly burnt out, who have tried everything to get back on track, but they're still feeling either chronically fatigued, chronically anxious, chronically depressed, chronically underslept, chronic insomnia. And I help them free themselves of the root cause of the imbalance in order for them to reclaim that extraordinary, magical life that they want for themselves. Every single client that ever walks through my door, I always ask them, first question I ask them is, what do you want? Because I know what you don't want. I know what you don't want. That's why you're here. But what do you want instead? And what comes out of their mouth is always the same. I want to be calm. I want to be happy. I want to be confident. It's the same words over and over and over and over again. And here's the thing. You cannot be calm, happy, and confident and healthy. You can't be those things if you're carrying around an under-regulated, overloaded stress response. Can't. It's not possible. You can't be energized if your nervous system is out of balance. You can't be energized and calm and happy if your subconscious mind is overloaded with unresolved stuff from the past, the present, and the future. Not possible. So what I do is I help them tap into feelings of reclaim, embody feeling happy, calm, and confident by clearing the internal conflicts from the level of the subconscious mind and the nervous system.
Wow. I agree with everything you just said. I love it. So how did you get into this work? Was it through your own personal experience of like being a corporate and burning out?
Yes. So, you know how like when you're young and you're at school and your teacher asks you, oh, what do you want to be when you grow up? I mean, I certainly never raised my hand and said, oh, teacher, I want to be an internal conflict resolution expert. Ever, 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 ever. You know, I was one of these people who didn't know what I wanted to do. And now I know why I didn't know what I wanted to do for, you know, when your nervous system is overloaded and when your subconscious mind is also burdened with internal conflicts, your capacity to think clearly and to be free of self-doubt is compromised. And because I had been carrying around internal conflict unknowingly for so many years, that's a big reason why I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. Just as a quick backstory, I was born in the Middle East, in Lebanon, a few years before the Lebanese Civil War of 1975. And that war was one of the longest in modern history. And it lasted about 17 years, claimed the lives of about 350,000 people, and it displaced millions and millions of people. And we, like me and my siblings and my parents, we were within that last statistic. So we managed to leave the area of conflict pretty early on. But, you know, I was born into chaos and I was born into conflict and I was born into disorder, right? And even though I left early and I heard the narrative and told myself the narrative, we're unaffected by the war because we left early, my nervous system had a different experience and a different memory, right? And then many years down the road, this was now in my late 30s, my life started to shut down and crumble and fall apart all around me. And you know, maybe you don't know, maybe like just from working with people or observation or life experience, you know that when things start to go dramatically wrong in one area of your life, it has a spillover effect into all areas of your life, right? So my career was in shambles, my relationships were in shambles, my relationship with myself was toxic, and eventually it started showing up in my physical health. My physical health had been pretty bad for a number of years. I mean, like chronic pain, chronic headaches, not chronic migraines, chronic headaches, bad adult acne, bad digestion, horrible periods or lack of periods, constant respiratory infections, and a dizziness that was unexplained, you know, like fainting spells that were unexplained. One day on my way to work, at the time I was still working as a teacher, one day on my way to work, I lost control of the car. I passed out behind the wheel of the car. The car spun and it ended up on the other side of the road. And when I came to, I mean, I was only, you know, I had only lost consciousness for about, 5 minutes or so, but it seemed like an eternity. And when I came to, I was petrified because I had no understanding of what happened, no understanding. So I hid it. I didn't tell anyone about it, hoping, like many of us do, that if you don't look at it, it's not there and it's not real. You don't want to give any power to it. But things don't work that way. They don't work that way because that was a symptom of a root cause. And that was a message from my nervous system and from my subconscious mind that something needed shifting. I didn't heed the call, and then things continued to get progressively worse. Eventually, I had to do something about it, and I went to see, I started doing the medical rounds, Libby, and doctor after doctor after doctor after doctor after doctor said to me, oh, all your bloods are negative, there's absolutely nothing wrong with you. And while most patients actually, that's music to our ears when a doctor says there's nothing wrong with you, it wasn't. By the fifth time I was in a doctor's office and he said that to me, I burst into tears. And I said, but doctor, I don't understand. Like, if there's nothing wrong with me, why don't I feel okay? Why do I feel so bad? Why do I feel so bad if there's nothing wrong with me? And now, Libby, do you know that now in 2021, 90%, the statistic is 90%, according to Gabor Mate and Peter Levin, 90% of doctors' visits are unexplained. The doctor has no explanation for what's going on. And that was the case with me. And I see you shaking your head. I'm sure you've had that experience. You've heard that experience as well from other people. And the only thing that the doctor at the time prescribed to me was drugs, medication, and talk therapy. So the diagnosis that he provided me was PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and depression. And I dismissed both of these diagnoses because in my mind, I'm like, I can't be depressed because I'm positive and I'm optimistic and I'm cheerful. And in my mind, I had a misconception that depression only hits negative, pessimistic people. Now I know depression is simply large amounts of unprocessed sadness and grief. That's what depression is. After 15 years of resolving it, that's what I've come to learn. It is when we don't look at accumulated emotions of sadness, loss, and grief over a long period of time, they presented themselves, those emotions present themselves in that feeling of depression. And the post-traumatic stress disorder, I also dismissed because I'm like, this is not even possible because nothing traumatic has ever happened to me. Now, I wasn't interested in the medication piece. I thought, well, maybe some therapy might be helpful because the way he put it to me is that, maybe the way you think and the way you feel are maybe impacting how you feel. And I thought that's quite progressive of him to say. And I was open to it. So I went to the therapy. It was talk therapy. I think looking back on it, it was psychotherapy. Looking back on it, that's what it was. I had no understanding back then. I went for 2 sessions and I never went back, Libby, because every single time I went, well, the 2 times that I actually felt worse than when I went in. Talking about how bad my life is and how bad I feel. I'm like, there's got to be another way. And that's when I set out on an inquiry 15 years ago into what does it take to recover from chronic conditions in a way that is quick, easy, natural, effective, and has no side effects. And it basically was years of self-study and trainings and workshops and certifications. And trying it on myself, trial and error into what works and what doesn't. And then eventually when my symptoms cleared, because I had 3 burnouts, the one that I'm describing is the first one. After my last burnout, which was here when I moved to New Zealand 7 years ago, that's what I put everything together into a system. And of everything that I learned and that I applied on my journey to recover from chronic conditions. And that's now what I do for my clients who are suffering from chronic conditions that are unexplained. It's an 8-step platform that helps you to feel calm, happy, confident, healthy, all those things that people tell me they want more of, in a way that also teaches self-mastery and connects you very, very deeply with the internal resources of your nervous system and your subconscious mind, so that they do the heavy lifting for you and that you don't have to do it yourself.
I'm bewildered by that story. It's just everything that I am really passionate about, but it's all packed into one quite obviously long and scary journey. And I think that's how I used to teach the lightning process. I don't know if Bianca told you about that but that was the commonality was people experiencing chronic conditions, facing those unexplainable, that this might be with you forever. Hey, we can try this, but it might not work, or it might work for a bit and it might stop working. It's always going to flare up, things like fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue. So that is incredibly inspiring. And so with that program, is that now what you teach? Do you teach that one-on-one, or do you teach group trainings? How does that work?
So, so one-on-one group coaching, workshops, and master classes. And of course, depending on the length of so all of my offerings weave from this 8-step approach, from this blueprint. It's a blueprint, actually. That's what it is. Of course, at varying levels of depth and involvement, but all of my work incorporates that because Libby, here's what I found, especially because I studied a lot of modalities. All modalities definitely have their place and their benefit and their merits, 100%. However, what I've found, and this is in my personal journey, and the clients that come to me tell me the same thing, that there's limitations to what each modality brings forward. And so if you want a long-lasting solution that empowers all areas of your life, you need a multimodality solution, because we know that when we're chronically tired, for example, we have burnout, that doesn't just affect our physical health. So we need a solution then that targets the body, the nervous system, the mind, the emotions, and your lifestyle. And that's what I've done with this blueprint, in order to support all areas of your life where the problem exists, so that so the nervous system and the subconscious mind will quickly bring you forward to feeling calm, happy, healthy, and confident.
And are those results for clients who come and see you, are they quite quick? Do they find? Yeah.
Yeah, because you're working with the part of the neurology, the part of the hardwiring that's all about you and your survival and what's in your best interest. I mean, the number one job of our subconscious mind, the number one job is to keep us alive. That's its number one job. It's number one directive. And the nervous system as well. That is its number one job. And so it can do wonders, and it achieves wonders and miracles for you. Now, yes, it's its number one job. That is its number one job. And it will prioritize that over feelings of calm, happiness, confidence, and ease and well-being. But also, it has the capacity to also help you thrive and to help you live a more fulfilling life. Because, when we are in the alternative branch of the nervous system, that's not doing the chronic stress, that's not in that perpetual mobilization response, the nervous system knows how to rest and heal and repair and restore and digest and rejoice as well. So it knows how to give you all of what you want more of, but it can't do it on its own. That's the problem where many of us face. Yes, we are born with that innate capacity, biological capacity to do that. But in order to do that, we need to flick the switch. That's the only thing. That's the only thing getting in the way. So when you flick the switch, boom, the results are very rapid. The longest I ever work with anyone, the longest ever, and that's with the most chronic of conditions, is 3 months. The longest. And with and we know, like with other modalities, it's like, I know when clients come to see me, they've done it all before they come to see me, Libby, and it probably is with you as well. It's not a first port of call. But I do believe in 10 years' time, our work will become a first port of call for people. I really do believe that in the depths of my heart.
Yeah, I agree as well. And when I mentioned Bianca, I'm referring to Bianca Smeeks from Neurospark, who you know as well. But yeah, we always talk about how exciting that is, that some of these concepts, say 10, 15 years ago, were like not very well known, and more people are getting behind them. And in 10 years, I think they will be in very, very high demand. I really liked what you said before. So you said depression is unprocessed sadness and grief. Or something along those lines. And I think there's a really nice way to describe it. I wondered if you could speak about this internal conflict that you mentioned. So you grew up in the Middle East, and then you got removed from the situation, and then what internal conflict? Could you give some examples of that?
Yes, of course. Yes, absolutely. So, I didn't actually become aware of the internal conflicts until my second burnout. So that first burnout, I was living in Curacao in the Caribbean at the time. And this was 2006, so I was 36 years old. My second burnout happened when I was in Dubai. I was 40 at the time, and I was living in Dubai. And while things had gotten better from my first burnout episode, I still wasn't where I wanted to be. And by the time I turned 40, I developed precancerous cells. And this coincided with the time that my mom was diagnosed with cancer, and that my maternal aunt died from cancer. So that really opened my eyes into, the trajectory that this could go on if I didn't do things differently. So when I started looking into, what causes chronic disease and cancer, because I believe, cancer is a chronic disease. That is my belief. That was the very first time I heard the message that your emotional state can cause toxicity that can contribute to compromised immune response, which can give rise to cancerous cells and autoimmune conditions. I had never come across that idea before, ever. But that made so much sense to me that there is some kind of internal emotional toxic terrain that I hadn't been considering that's contributing to my physical symptoms. So I started digging some more, because remember, at this point, I'm still doing a lot of self-study and self-exploration and self-experimentation. And that's when I came across this thing called subconscious mind, the storehouse of all of our life experience that also happens to be the emotional mind, right? So I booked in to go for a session with a hypnotherapist. And that's only one way that you can access the subconscious, is through hypnotherapy. You can do it in many other ways, but that's my preferred modality to do it. And the hypnotherapist at the time, this was 11 years ago, she instructed my subconscious mind to go back to the very first time that was responsible for all of the limitations in my life. And the subconscious mind is very compliant, Libby. It will do exactly what you ask of it, but you need to ask it. So it went back. It traveled back all the way in time to the time that I was about 4.5 or 5. And we were fleeing the war zone. And it was me and my mom, because my dad was caught outside of the country. It was my younger brother, who was like 3, and my little sister, who was 1.5 years. And about 10 minutes into it, this was about 2 a.m. in the morning, and about 10 minutes into the journey to the airport, the bombing started. So there were bombs flying overhead, and there was shelling overhead and bombs in the distance. And my mother, in an attempt to keep the kids safe, what did she do? What any mom would do. She pushed all of our heads underneath the seat of the car. This is now in hypnosis, a memory coming back to me. And I couldn't breathe. The nervous system went into panic mode, and it never reset. That was the root cause of all of the difficulties and the limitations in my life that were created by an overactivated stress response that was never reset, that was never regulated. And it started to limit my physical health, my emotional health, my mental health, my relationships, and my career. And so that is a life event or a life experience is an internal conflict, because it's there, that memory of it, that impression is there. I wasn't aware of it consciously. I wasn't aware of that time, because all I was aware of was the story that, we left early, we were untroubled by chaos. But the mind and the nervous system had a different recollection. They had a memory, and granted it was implicit. They had an implicit memory that was stored in the mind and the nervous system that was creating trouble and creating conflict on the inside internally, but I wasn't aware of it consciously.
When you go back to that memory, what are you doing then? Whether that's in this session or your clients, are you recorrecting how it's stored? Are you changing the way you think about it? Are you erasing it completely? Like, what is the best thing to do there?
Very, very good question. So the way around that is my preferred approach to dealing with trauma, but also dealing with memories from the past, is you never reassociate, ever, ever, ever you reassociate. Remember what I told you earlier, that the mind's number one job is you and your protection and your survival. It will never reveal anything to you that you're not ready to deal with and integrate. It won't. So obviously the mind knew that I was ready for the integration to happen. That's why it revealed it to me. And so when you're working with me or with anyone else on, clearing at a subconscious level, just know that there's no way that you can cause harm. There's no way, because your mind won't allow you to go somewhere that you're not ready to go. It won't. So, but it's going there in a super, super relaxed state, because that's what hypnosis does. It activates the parasympathetic functioning such a heightened state. It's kind of like your anesthesia. It's like you have anesthesia, you know, and you're in such an altered state where your brainwave activity is functioning very differently than when the amygdala is on and when you're in an overwhelmed state. In that brain state, because it is a brain state, in that brain state, when the parasympathetic functioning is heightened and your brainwave activities are so slow and you're in your subconscious mind, re-scripting can happen of the scene. And it gets stored in the memory differently, because until then, the memory was stored in my nervous system as an implicit memory, because I didn't know it consciously. So with the process, what happens is you're looking at it, but with the understanding of the adult, because the problem was when I was 5, I had no awareness that I was going to be okay. I had no awareness that it was going to be okay. So there was freak out mode, but the adult knows that the child will be okay. And so it's just coming in, bringing the resources of the wisdom, the life experience of the child of the adult to the child, removing the fear from the child, and then giving the child a glimpse into the good stuff that lies ahead, and then giving the adult instructions of what to do instead. Because until that time, the repeated program for me, because that's what the child learned, was freak out. If you freak out once, it's not a problem. If you freak out for a day, it's not a problem. If you freak out even for a week, it's not a problem. But if you freak out for 30 years, it's going to become problematic. And so you're just giving a different instruction to the subconscious mind of the adult to do a different program other than the freak out. And that's something that you kind of negotiate with the client beforehand of what they want instead. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Totally. So keeping your story in mind, what about, and I hope this is okay to ask, but what about your siblings? Because if you were all children under the age of, let's say, 7 to 10, is your belief that it's sort of some things impact some children in ways that it won't impact the next child? Or do you think every child in that situation was affected in some way?
That is such a good, this is something that we're currently, all 3 of us were talking about, because, while my siblings are, quite open to a different way of seeing the world, they haven't had the life experience or the training I've had. So they kind of look at things a little bit differently. But most recently, especially with my sister, her health is on a downward trajectory. And I know firsthand it's because of all of this unresolved internal conflict that is impacting her subconscious mind and her nervous system. With my brother as well, although he's a little bit more open now to exploring it, and he's been working with hypnotherapists and with yoga specialists and other practitioners to resolve it. But I also know that we inherited it from our parents, because my parents suffered their own traumas, like leading up to us escaping the war zone. My dad was kidnapped 3 times, Libby. So, that inherited, we inherit, when people say it's genetic, I believe it's epigenetic, epigenetically, we all learned the freak out responses of our parents that were conditioned by their overwhelm and traumatic life experiences. And when I share this story with people either relate to it or they don't, because, but my point isn't about war or kidnapping or anything. That's not the point of the story. The point of the story is about overwhelm. In my case, it was very obvious. My battleground was very obvious. It manifested in precancerous cells in my body. And my message here is that all of us, especially if you're struggling with a condition that is chronic and that has no medical explanation, chances are there's an internal battleground that hasn't been looked at, an internal conflict or many internal conflicts that haven't been resolved. And internal conflicts could be life experiences or memories, but it could also be things like negative emotions that are unprocessed. It could be things like very limiting beliefs or limiting self-talk. It could be things like values that are unaligned. That's huge. Misaligned values are a massive source of internal conflict. It could be unfulfilled needs. It could be a trauma. It could be a number of things that are creating, that are limiting you from being and feeling where you want to be and where you want to feel.
What about someone's coming to mind, a family member of mine who I know from the work that I've done and the journey that I've taken, I know that they've got some unresolved things and they've probably got a memory that would be really valuable for them to go back to. But whenever I bring it up with them, they go, oh no, I'm fine. I'm fine. It's never affected me. It's not a big deal. It definitely isn't that. That's not the reason why I have this addiction. And I wonder, would you say to that they're just not quite ready to do the work? Or would you say that would the subconscious mind let them find what it is that's going on for them? Because I'm sure lots of people say, okay, I'm stressed, but I'm actually fine. I love my life. Nothing's going on. Will the brain take them there if they give it the chance? The mind, sorry.
Okay, couple of things there. I hear this a lot as well. And I relate to it because I was one of these people, and just because you're not aware of it, it doesn't mean it's not there, eh? Just because I wasn't aware that there was a massive unprocessed trauma and a number of unprocessed grief emotions and sadness emotions, it doesn't mean that they weren't there. It doesn't mean that they weren't there and that they weren't creating imbalance underneath the surface. And I got so good at putting on the mask, that there's no way you could tell that there was anything wrong. And I'll tell you firsthand from what I know from personal experience, from my study and my clinical observations now, Libby, people pleasing, if you're a people pleaser, chances are you've had unresolved trauma. If you have a problem saying no, chances are, yes, there's a lot of stuff bothering you, but you're not willing to look at it. If you have trouble with boundaries, also you're a candidate for looking at things. If you can't feel your emotions, also. So that's one kind of way to have a conversation about that. But also there's a readiness piece, Libby. Some people will never be ready. Like my sister may never be ready to do the work, and that's okay. That's where they are on their journey. And that's totally okay, because that leads to the second part of your question, because your subconscious mind will never, ever betray your intention, ever. So if your intention is not to go there, there's absolutely nothing that me or any other hypnotherapist can do, contrary to all of the myths out there that hypnotherapy or hypnosis can somehow circumvent your will. That's not possible, because your mind will not let you go there if you don't want to go there.
So I've got a question about the subconscious mind. So I'm sure you're well aware of, is it we're operating from 95% of the subconscious mind on a day-to-day basis?
So yeah, somewhere in 93, somewhere around there, but definitely, predominantly, we're living our life from our subconscious, that we are the result of our subconscious. The results that you have or don't have are the results of your subconscious. So if you look at if you look at your life, you take inventory of your life now, where you are or where you're not is a result of your subconscious. That's the best diagnostic of what's going on subconsciously. So if you have everything that you want, you feel everything that you want to feel, you're doing everything you want to do, and you're being everything that you want to be, then you are very much aligned with your subconscious and you have no internal conflict. My experience is that there are very, very, very few people who have that ability to totally be in total alignment with their subconscious. For the rest of us, if whatever it is that we are not accessing, that we want more of, it's because there's something in the subconscious and there's some internal conflict at the subconscious mind and the nervous system level. It's not enough to just work with the subconscious mind, Libby. It's not enough. And that's what my third burnout taught me, because the second burnout taught me about the subconscious mind, and that's where I started studying it. But then my third burnout taught me about the importance of the nervous system, which is so important.
So I'm really keen to dive into the nervous system. I just wanted to just tap onto one last thing about the subconscious. So I was going to say, so considering that maybe we have 5 to 7% of our conscious mind operating for us, I just wondered what you would say to someone who really, really wants to quit smoking, vaping, an addiction, and they know that's what they want to do. Why can't they do that with their conscious mind? Why they know they want to do it and they're trying really, really hard, but they just can't? Why?
It's a prime example. It's a prime example of internal conflict. Prime example. And by the way, all addictive behavior, just like all chronic disease, is basically symptomatic of trauma, unresolved overwhelm in the nervous system, all of it. I mean, the work of Gabor Mate indicates that, Peter Levin, Bessel van der Kolk. It's a well-established idea now that the pathway to recovery from addiction and chronic conditions is to recover from trauma from the nervous system, and you do that by resolving the emotional toxicity. But back to the smoking example. So first of all, I would say that there's a trauma involved, so you need to work on the trauma, and you need to work on a belief system. Maybe there's a belief system there that they're not aware of, that maybe I can't quit, or that was me because I used to be a smoker. And my belief system around it was, if I quit, I'm going to gain weight. Or if I quit, I'm going to be stressed. Remember what I said about your subconscious mind? It will always take care of you. So if it perceives something that you want isn't going to be beneficial for you, it will not deliver for you. It will not. And that's a prime example of when you're trying to will a behavior and it's not happening. That's a prime example of a disconnect between your conscious and your subconscious. And it means there's some internal conflict there that needs to be resolved so that your subconscious mind supports your conscious intention for change.
Mm-hmm. When you say it, yeah, it makes so much sense. I really like what you said about addiction and trauma. That really rings home. So let's talk about burnout number 3 for you. Sorry, I shouldn't be saying it in such an excited way, but I want to talk about the nervous system because you've said that, you can't address one without the other. We're talking about the mind and the body connection.
Yeah, so burnout 3 happened when I moved to New Zealand. So I moved to New Zealand. I met my gorgeous Kiwi husband in Dubai. That's where I had my second burnout. And then he moved back here. We had a long distance relationship, blah, blah. Make a long story short, we got married and I moved here in 2014. The year that I moved here, so this was about 4 years after my second burnout. And by that point, a lot of things had come right in my life. I would say actually most things on the outside had come right in my life. And so when I moved here, there was a lot of big changes happening at once. I quit a job. My mother died. I was with her, nursing her. I immigrated. Living with someone for the first time, getting married, dealing with backlash from stepkids. I wasn't working. I was navigating a new culture shock. I didn't know my nervous system was overwhelmed. I didn't know that because I didn't know about the nervous system back then. So I had my third burnout. Now, the good news, if you want, the good news about that burnout is it wasn't as dramatic and as crippling and as long-lasting as the other two. And I think a big part of it is because I had done a lot of the clearing of the big stuff when I started working heavily with the subconscious mind. However, it was still limiting, like being chronically fatigued. And because, here's the thing, when you're burnt out, burnout and depression and PTSD go together. I was depressed for no reason. I mean, my life on the outside, Libby, was great, but I would be crying all the time for no reason and then feeling guilty because outwardly my life was so good. And so, again, power of intention, It's all about intention. I put out an intention there about wanting, to find the missing link to this. And about I don't know, about maybe a month later, I came across the work of IREST, Richard Miller, and somatic sensing. And I went to study it. And that's when I understood, because IREST is integrative restoration, and it basically is, it's a secular form of yoga nidra that incorporates somatic therapies, somatic sensing, working with the body into the modality. And primarily, IREST was created as a tool to help returning veterans from the Middle East to recover from PTSD. So very much about the nervous system wholeness, and nervous system well-being. And so I started to study that really deeply and practice it daily. And wow. The change was radical, actually, radical. The level of, other than the burnout recovery and the level of energy being restored, but the level of presence and calm and clarity from working with the nervous system was like nothing I had ever experienced before. And that's why now when I work with my clients, it's non-negotiable to work with the nervous system to help them reset their nervous system and to customize their nervous system to whatever lacking resource is keeping them from expressing the life that they want. And when you combine that with hypnotherapy and working with the subconscious mind, it is profound, dramatic change and result that is long-lasting.
Are you doing physical, like with the nervous system? I'm assuming most people listening are aware. We're talking about the fight or flight response. We've also spoken about the parasympathetic nervous system, so that other branch that we're striving to be in a lot more. How are you like addressing that as well? Are you addressing that in a physical way? Is that what the IREST is? Is that like just physical relaxation and breath work and things like that?
That's a small part of it. So actually, if you like, I'm more than happy to share with your listeners and with you. I have a 30-day calendar to recharge your nervous system for more health, happiness, and success. So I incorporate some of those practices. Some of those practices there are they're kind of micro practices that can be done without supervision and without guidance. But the work that I do with my clients when we're together is actually tracing the feeling in the body out of the body. Because, Gabor Mate, I think, said it best. He said, trauma, overwhelm isn't the incident that happens to you. It's what happens inside of you in your nervous system when the yucky thing happens outside. When a yucky event happens to us, we have a yucky feeling inside our body, right? There's a tightness in the chest, a pressure in the head, a knot in the stomach, right? And that feeling in the body is correlated to an emotion, which is correlated to an earlier event that is creating the imbalance. So in a therapeutic setting, we're working with the feeling somatically. We're sensing the feeling, clearing the feeling from the child, the first time the child felt the yucky feeling, clearing it from the adult, and then giving the adult and the child a different physiology instead, based on what we talk about, what you want to feel instead, and anchor you to that. Anchor your nervous system to that feeling instead. And that way, because the brain is neuroplastic, that becomes the new way that you react in the world with that feeling in the body and that emotional state, instead of from that old biology and that old psychology, which is very limiting. And that's what I mean. That's what I mean by when we work on it in a one-on-one, one-on-one in the clinic, while supported by all of those other practices that I'm going to be sharing with you, that are part environmental, they're part breath related, they're part body related, they're part lifestyle related, and they're part habit related. Because it has to be holistic. And there's a lot of things that you can do on your own that don't require the guidance and the hand holding, and will provide you with a lot of benefit, like you'll see within the guide. But if there's a persistent nagging thing that you're not able to let go of on your own with these practices, it's probably because it's deeper and you need some guidance. And that's what I do in my clinic in combination with the subconscious mind.
Fascinating. And because you just touched on the brain as, neuroplastic. What did you just say? It's a great word.
Neuroplastic.
I haven't said that before.
I just made it up.
With that in mind, with these practices, are you getting your clients to do these like consistently?
Okay. So I believe, and probably you have that experience as well, I believe in accountability and I believe in integration, right? And so when I work with clients one-on-one, because my approach is solution focused and outcome based, once I negotiate with the client where you want to go instead and what are your desired outcomes, that holds me accountable to getting them there.
Couldn't agree more. So, Faye, I feel like I could talk to you for hours upon hours, but I'm going to rein it in. I'm going to ask you one more question. It's something that you touched on with your own journey, and I wanted to ask you, so the nervous system, we've got the stress response, and when we think about that stress response in animals or maybe even when we're referring back to our ancestors when they were out in the forest hunting for berries and what have you, and they found themselves in that fight or flight response. When we hear people talk about it, they say, and then we switch back into the parasympathetic. So the stressful event happens and then the nervous system, and then we're supposed to the stressful situation is gone. So the body should know that the threat is gone. Now it's time to go back into the rest and digest. But you have touched on the fact that you potentially had an unregulated nervous system for, did you say 30 years, something like your whole life up until the point 35 years. So why don't animals get that same? Why can they just nearly lose their life and then the next minute they're having a sleep in the sun?
Such a good point. So this brings me to the work of someone that I follow that I'm so passionate about. His name is Dr. Peter Levin. So he's actually the creator of somatic sensing therapies. So Dr. Peter Levin is a neuroevolutionary biology something or other, a bloody really smart man. And so he's an evolutionary biologist, but also interested in neurology and stuff like that. So for 20 years, he was obsessed with the idea of how is it that animals, exactly what you said, how is it that animals, they survive actual trauma, and yet the next day they're fine. Because you don't see zebras with PTSD or lions with depression or tigers with chronic pain. I mean, you don't see that in the wild, where these animals actually have had actual real threat and real reason for the activation of their stress response. Whereas we have a more advanced and complex nervous system than they do. Therefore, we have the same capacities, but yet we develop all of these chronic conditions. So his question for 20 years is, why does that not happen with us? And what he found was so simple and so true and so profound. And basically it's, when he observed these animals for 20 years, he observed a common practice among every single animal after surviving threat to their life. And that was that animals would literally shake it off, quite literally. They would shake off the trauma. They would release the stress hormones from their tissues, from the nervous system. And that allowed, and also they would pull themselves away from the situation. They would do what they needed to. They would have a sleep. They'd wake up the next day. The innate capacity to reset was there, and they could go on. We don't do that. We don't reset. We don't take time to look at what went wrong. We don't understand also that yes, while there isn't imminent threats to their survival, because the brain doesn't know the difference between what's real and what's imaginary, our emotional and financial and relational and career stresses are triggering the same biology, and we're not resetting. And so we're carrying all this emotional toxicity, all of this mental toxicity, all of this lifestyle toxicity from one day, 1 month, one job, one relationship, one country, one marriage to another, without pressing the reset button, without shaking it off. And so it accumulates until eventually the body says no, in the words of Gabor Mate. And chronic conditions actually are a beautiful way of your body saying no and giving you an opportunity to do something instead.
It makes so much sense. Yeah. So that it doesn't get stored and it's not, yeah. Wow. That was a better answer than I could have expected. Thank you. Now we know. No, that does make a lot of sense, actually. Wow. I feel like you've just shared so much wisdom. That was amazing. Yeah, I feel like like I said, I'm not using the video for anything, but if you could have seen me this whole time, I've just been sitting here listening so intently. I'm blown away. So thank you so much for your time, Faye.
My pleasure, Libby, my pleasure. And I always love talking to people on a similar mission.